Welcome to the Deep Dive, where I uploaded my transcript for the podcast and have two AI hosts talk about it. They may go into more depth than I went into. So without further ado, here's the Deep Dive.
Ever get stuck in one of those frustrating loops with someone, where they just can't seem to own up to their actions?
Oh, yeah.
Today, we're diving deep into the tricky world of accountability.
Or the lack of it.
That's right, or rather the lack of it in a relationship. And our source material, an audio excerpt called Difficulty with Accountability, the Why of Things, it really shines a light on how this whole accountability thing plays out so differently depending on, someone's personality and struggles.
Yeah, it's fascinating because accountability is really at the core of any healthy relationship, right?
Absolutely.
And when someone consistently avoids taking responsibility for their actions, it really impacts everything.
Totally.
From communication to trust.
Oh, it's like that feeling when you lend a friend your favorite book and it comes back with a coffee stain and a ripped page.
Right.
And they swear they have no idea how it happened.
Yeah.
It makes you question everything.
That's a perfect example.
Right.
We all make mistakes.
Of course.
But it's that constant deflecting and blame shifting.
Yeah.
That's a red flag. And that's really what we're calling difficulty with accountability.
Right.
It goes beyond the occasional slip up.
It's a pattern.
Right. It's a pattern.
And it's so easy to get frustrated.
Yeah.
And just think, what is wrong with this person?
Right.
But this excerpt really digs into the why, and it's pretty eye-opening.
It is. There are often much deeper psychological reasons why somebody struggles with accountability.
Okay.
And, it could be rooted in a fear of criticism. It could be a fragile ego that can't handle being wrong.
Yeah.
Or even a deep-seated fear of facing some uncomfortable truths about themselves.
So it's less about them being intentionally difficult and more about them struggling with some internal stuff.
Exactly.
Okay.
And, these struggles can be even more pronounced in people with certain personality disorders.
Right.
Which makes the path to accountability that much harder.
Okay, so let's talk about these personality disorders and how they link to all of this.
Okay.
The source material breaks them down into 4 modified clusters to help us kind of understand the nuances.
Right, and it's important to remember we're not about labeling anyone here.
Right.
We're just trying to make sense of how certain personality traits can make owning up to things extra tough.
Makes sense. So first up, we have what's called impulse disregard disorder.
Or ID.
Yeah. What's going on there?
People with ID often have a live-in-the-moment kind of approach.
Okay.
With very little concern for consequences. Accountability just doesn't factor into their decision-making.
Right.
They might lie, manipulate, or even become hostile when confronted.
Yeah.
Because in their minds, the rules just don't apply to them.
That sounds incredibly frustrating to deal with, like you're constantly hitting a wall.
It is.
What about extreme self-focus disorder?
ESFD.
ESFD. What makes accountability difficult for them?
For someone with ESFD, their self-image is everything. They see themselves as superior.
Okay.
And admitting fault just completely shatters that carefully constructed reality.
Oh, wow.
To protect their ego, they'll twist the narrative, they'll blame others, they'll lash out.
Oh.
Accountability to them is a sign of weakness.
So it's almost like a defense mechanism.
It is.
They can't handle the hit to their pride.
Exactly. And then we have emotional intensity disorder.
Okay.
Or EID.
ED.
Which throws another wrench in the mix.
I've definitely experienced how emotions can really cloud judgment.
Sure.
When I'm upset, it's hard to see the situation clearly and own up to my part in things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
People with EID experience this on a much larger scale.
Okay.
They have intense emotional swings.
Yeah.
And in the heat of the moment, their perception might be completely skewed.
Wow.
They might truly believe they're not at fault, even if later, when things calm down, they realize they were wrong.
So it's like their emotions jack their ability to be objective, making it almost impossible to be accountable in those heated moments.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
And lastly, we have dramatic attention-seeking disorder, or DASD.
Okay. This one sounds particularly tricky in terms of accountability.
It can be.
I imagine the need for attention might clash with owning up to mistakes.
It definitely can.
Yeah.
Individuals with DASD are wired to crave the spotlight.
Okay.
And if something goes wrong, admitting fault takes away from the positive attention they so desperately seek.
Right.
So they might twist the story, play the victim, downplay their role, all to maintain that positive image and keep the attention flowing.
It's like accountability is a threat to their whole stage persona.
Precisely.
Right.
So we have these 4 distinct clusters, and each one experiences this difficulty with accountability in their own way.
Right.
And it's not just about being bad or difficult. It often stems from these deeper underlying issues.
But, okay, we've talked a lot about the person avoiding accountability.
Right.
What about the people on the receiving end? How does constantly being met with this lack of responsibility actually affect them?
That's the crucial question, and it's something we'll explore further in part 2 of this deep dive.
All right, listeners, you'll have to stay tuned for that.
Yes, you will.
We're just getting started with unraveling this complex topic of accountability. Welcome back. So we just explored how different personality types struggle with accountability, in their own unique ways.
Right.
But now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about you, the listener.
Okay.
If you are dealing with someone who constantly avoids taking responsibility, what is the impact on you?
That's the crucial question.
Yeah.
Imagine feeling like you're constantly walking on eggshells,
Yeah.
never sure what's going to trigger that blame game.
Right.
It creates this pervasive sense of
Anxiety
and uncertainty in the relationship.
It's exhausting.
It is.
Like, you can never truly relax because you're always kind of bracing yourself for that next conflict.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a battle just to get them to see their part in it.
Exactly. And over time, this constant lack of accountability really erodes trust.
Yeah.
It's like the foundation of the relationship starts to crumble.
Totally.
Because you can't rely on the other person to be honest and own up to their actions.
And if you can't trust someone, how can you truly feel safe and secure in the relationship?
Right. It's like trying to build a house on shifting sand.
Exactly.
That lack of trust leads to resentment, frustration, and this feeling of powerlessness. You start to question your own reality.
Oh, for sure.
Wondering if you're overreacting or being too sensitive.
That's gaslighting, isn't it?
It can be.
When someone makes you doubt your own perceptions and experiences.
Especially when someone's consistently denying their role in a situation.
Yeah.
You start to internalize the blame and wonder if you're the problem.
Right.
This can lead to a whole host of negative emotions.
I bet.
Feeling trapped, unheard, and emotionally drained.
It's like this slow poison that just seeps into the relationship and like your own sense of self-worth.
Absolutely.
But here's the thing. I think a lot of people in this situation, they feel stuck.
Yeah.
They might love this person, but they're miserable and they just don't know what to do.
You're absolutely right.
Right.
And that's where it's crucial to remember that you have options.
Okay.
You're not powerless, even if it feels that way.
Right.
There are steps you can take to protect yourself and reclaim your sense of agency.
Okay, so let's talk about those steps. What can you do if you're in a relationship with someone who just can't seem to take responsibility? Our source offered some practical strategies for protecting yourself.
Right.
And I think this is where it gets really empowering.
Absolutely. One of the first things you can do is set clear boundaries.
Okay.
And this means defining what you will and will not tolerate in the relationship.
So it's like drawing a line in the sand and saying, this is where my limit is.
Yeah.
If you cross it, there will be consequences.
Exactly. It's about protecting your emotional well-being and refusing to be a doormat.
Okay.
You're not obligated to accept blame or responsibility for things that aren't yours to own.
But how do you actually do that? I mean, it's easy to say set boundaries, but when you're in the thick of it,
Sure.
it can be hard to stand your ground, especially if this person is really skilled at manipulating or guilt tripping you.
That's where communication comes in.
Okay.
You need to clearly and assertively express your boundaries.
Okay.
This means using I statements, such as, I feel hurt when you blame me for things I didn't do.
Okay.
Or, I need you to take responsibility for your actions.
So it's about owning your feelings and stating your needs.
Yes.
Rather than attacking or blaming the other person.
Exactly.
Okay.
Shifting the focus from them to how their actions impact you.
Right.
And remember, setting boundaries isn't about controlling the other person.
Yeah.
It's about taking control of your own emotional well-being.
It's like putting on that oxygen mask first. You have to prioritize your own mental and emotional health.
Yes.
Before you can effectively deal with the situation.
Exactly. Now, setting boundaries is a great first step.
Okay.
But it's important to recognize that it might not always be enough.
Right.
If the person is unwilling to change or acknowledge their behavior, you might need to consider more drastic measures.
Like what? Is walking away ever the right answer?
It can be.
Okay.
And it's a valid option.
Yeah.
Sometimes, despite our best efforts, a relationship just isn't salvageable.
Wow.
If one person is consistently refusing to be accountable for their actions.
It's like beating your head against a brick wall, hoping that eventually it will crumble.
Exactly. And you deserve to be in a relationship where you feel respected, heard, and valued.
Right.
If the other person isn't willing to put in the work,
you
have the right to choose your own happiness and walk away.
That's such a powerful message, knowing that you have that power to choose.
It is.
You don't have to stay in a situation that's hurting you.
Right.
Even if you care about the person.
Absolutely. And that act of choosing can be incredibly liberating. It's about reclaiming your sense of self-worth and recognizing that you deserve to be in a healthy, supportive relationship.
But before we go any further, I think it's important to acknowledge that saying walk away is much easier said than done.
Of course.
There are often really complex emotions involved,
right?
Especially if you've invested a lot of time and energy into the relationship.
You're absolutely right. It's a difficult decision, and there's no shame in struggling with it.
Right.
Seeking support from friends, family, or a therapist can be incredibly helpful during these times.
So surrounding yourself with people who understand what you're going through.
Yes.
And can offer guidance and encouragement.
Absolutely.
But, okay, let's say someone does decide to stay in the relationship.
Yeah.
What are some strategies for navigating this lack of accountability in a way that minimizes the damage?
Sure.
And maximizes the chances of, positive change?
That's where we'll shift our focus in part 3 of this deep dive.
We'll explore some practical tips for encouraging accountability, setting healthy expectations, and ultimately building a stronger foundation for the relationship.
All right, listeners, you'll have to stay tuned for the grand finale of our accountability exploration.
Yes, you will.
We'll be back with some concrete strategies and tools to help you navigate these tricky waters.
All right, welcome back to the final part of our accountability deep dive.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot.
We have.
From understanding, why people struggle with it to the impact that it has on relationships. Now, let's get practical.
Okay.
If you are choosing to stay in a relationship where accountability is lacking, what can you do to actually make things better?
It's all about kind of shifting from a place of reaction to a place of proactivity.
Okay.
Instead of constantly getting caught up in that blame game, you can start to set the stage for healthier communication and, more responsible behavior.
I love that. Being proactive, it's about taking back some of that control we talked about. Right. But how do we actually do that? Where do we even begin?
Well, it goes back to those clear expectations we mentioned earlier. But this time, it's not just about stating your boundaries.
Right.
It's about having a conversation, a real conversation about what accountability looks like in your relationship.
So less about laying down the law and more about this collaborative effort.
Exactly.
To define what healthy accountability means for both of you.
Exactly. It's about sitting down together when things are calm.
Right.
And saying, okay, how can we handle disagreements or mistakes in a way that feels fair and respectful for both of us?
I imagine this conversation might be a little awkward.
It might be.
Especially if open communication hasn't exactly been a strong point in the relationship.
That's also a sign that it's a conversation worth having.
Okay.
You can start by saying something like, hey, I care about us, and I want to make sure we're both feeling heard and understood. When things go wrong, I want us to be able to talk about it openly and figure out solutions together.
So setting the tone of collaboration and mutual respect.
Exactly.
Right from the start.
Right. And then you can start brainstorming specific strategies.
Okay.
For example, you might agree to use I statements during disagreements to express your feelings without blaming.
Okay.
Or you might decide to take a time out when things get heated and come back to the conversation later when you're both calmer.
It's almost like creating this game plan for healthy conflict resolution.
It is.
You're both on the same team, working towards a shared goal.
That's a great analogy.
Right.
And remember, it's not about being perfect.
Of course not.
It's about progress.
Right.
There will be slip-ups along the way.
Of course.
But as long as both of you are committed to the process and willing to keep working at it, you can start to create a more accountable and fulfilling dynamic.
So it's about those small wins.
It is.
Those moments where you actually see your partner making an effort to own their actions or communicate more constructively.
Yes.
Those moments can really fuel the hope that change is possible.
Absolutely. And it's important to acknowledge and appreciate those efforts.
Yeah.
Let your partner know when you see them taking responsibility or trying to communicate more effectively. Positive reinforcement can go a long way in motivating them to keep going.
It's like watering a plant.
Yeah.
A little encouragement, a little positive feedback can help it grow stronger.
Exactly.
But what about those times when things kind of backslide?
Sure.
Like, what if you have that conversation, you set those expectations,
right,
and then your partner falls back into those old patterns?
It's bound to happen. Change isn't linear, especially when dealing with, ingrained behaviors.
Of course.
But that doesn't mean you have to throw in the towel.
Okay.
It just means you need to revisit the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Gently remind them of the agreements you made and reaffirm your commitment to working through it together.
So it's like hitting the reset button.
Yes.
But with that added layer of experience and awareness.
Exactly.
From the previous attempts.
And each time you revisit the conversation, you're reinforcing those expectations and strengthening those communication muscles.
It's like building a foundation.
It is.
Brick by brick.
Yeah.
It takes time and effort, but eventually you create something solid and stable.
Beautifully said. And as you continue to build that foundation of accountability, you might find that other aspects of the relationship start to improve as well.
Oh, yeah.
Communication becomes more open and honest.
Right.
Trust deepens. And you just feel more connected and secure with each other.
It's like a ripple effect.
It is.
Where accountability becomes the catalyst for positive change.
Exactly.
In all areas of the relationship.
And ultimately, that's what this whole deep dive has been about.
Right.
Understanding accountability, its complexities, and its incredible power to transform relationships.
I feel like we've covered so much from those aha moments about why people avoid taking responsibility to, practical strategies for encouraging positive change.
We have. And if there's one takeaway I hope our listeners leave with, it's this.
Okay.
Accountability is not about blame or punishment.
Okay.
It's about growth, connection, and creating a more fulfilling and authentic relationship with yourself and with your partner.
Beautifully said. It's a journey, not a destination.
It is.
And it's a journey worth taking.
It is.
Thanks for joining us on this accountability deep dive.
Yes, thank you.
We hope you found it insightful and empowering. And remember, you have the power to choose, to change, and to create the kind of relationships you deserve.